Did you know that there are more neurons within your brain than there are stars within the Milky Way galaxy? Hello, and welcome to another episode of Who Are You?, which is a video series exploring different facets of human existence, seeking to answer the question of who are you? As a living, breathing, thinking human being, what makes up your consciousness? And today we are exploring or approaching that question from a psychological perspective. As I mentioned, you have about 86 billion neurons within your mind, which is an insane amount. But these neurons are constantly firing and connecting to thousands of others every single millisecond. In fact, they move up to speeds of about 120 meters per second as tiny electrical signals are released by your neurons within your mind that are called action potentials. These action potentials, when one neuron fires, they release chemical messengers called neurotransmitters that bridge the synaptic gap and trigger the next cell. All this is to say, this process is happening constantly. It allows thought, it allows me to speak, it allows me to move my hands to think. All this comes together to form a psychological you, and that is what I wish to analyze and just give an overview about today. Psychology is the study of the human mind, its processes, its patterns, and its behaviors. Biology focuses more on the physical machinery of the brain, the actual neurons, hormones, anatomy, and such, where psychology focuses on the processes that these mechanisms create. Perception, thought, memory, emotion, identity, these things that make up what you perceive, what you think of when you think of you. Different regions of your brain support different aspects of consciousness and identity. The hippocampus, which is often called the brain's memory librarian, takes fleeting experiences and encodes them into long-term memory while simultaneously generating spatial maps that let you navigate the world. Without a hippocampus, you can't form new memories. This is very notable in the famous patient case of Henry Molaison, who lost both hippocampi in surgery and lived the rest of his life being unable to form new episodic memories. Your prefrontal cortex, which is located just behind your forehead, is sometimes called the executive of the brain. It supports your planning, decision-making, moral reasoning, and impulse control. This region develops last amongst everything else in your brain, about in your mid-20s, which is why when you make different decisions as an adult than you would as an adolescent. Damage to your prefrontal cortex can dramatically alter your personality. This is the most famously known in the case of Phineas Gage, a railroad worker who had an iron rod shoved through his brain, and while his mind was left intact, it did irreparable changes to his temperament and judgment. He seemed to no longer feel things such as embarrassment and regret, and his personality was completely altered. The amygdala is a small almond-shaped structure within the brain that processes emotional salience, especially fear. Your amygdala helps you determine which experiences are remembered and retained. Events that are tied to strong emotions are consolidated more deeply. This may explain why you might not remember what you had for lunch yesterday, but you can very vividly remember traumatic details of a certain event or an accomplishment that you feel very proud of. Several theories attempt to explain why this neuromachinery creates conscious experience. Global workspace theory compares the brain to a theater. Countless unconscious processes happen backstage, but then when a new piece of information is broadcast into the spotlight, it becomes aware and it is front and center. This allows consciousness to become available to reasoning, decision-making, and memory. For example, let's say you're sitting at an intersection in your car and you see the red light, but it's not until you actually act upon it that you send a signal down to your foot to apply your foot to the brake that you actually feel a conscious experience toward the stimuli. Integrated information theory argues that consciousness corresponds to the degree of integration within a system. A digital camera might have a sensor that can detect millions of different pixels, but each of these pixels work as independent beings, unlike your brain, which has many interconnected loops. And it is this integration measured as phi that gives rise to awareness. Recurrent processing theory emphasizes feedback loops. Raw sensory input passes forward through the brain, but consciousness only emerges when higher order regions send the signal back to early areas for reprocessing. This is why you might have to do a double take at something, is because like you see it, you take in the information, but it's not until your brain actually processes it and sends back recurrent processing feeds to suddenly create awareness. Higher order thought theories argue that a mental state becomes conscious when you're aware of being in that state. A very simple example is, let's say you cut your hand but don't notice. It's not until you see the wound and feel the blood running down your skin that you become conscious of the pain, and that sensation enters your consciousness as a whole. Predictive processing framework views the brain as a prediction machine that is constantly generating expectations about reality and updating them when sensory input contradicts these predictions. So let's say you're walking through a dark room and there's a coffee table that you had forgotten that you moved. You can't see the coffee table, but your mind is telling you that that table is still where it used to be. And it's not until that your shin collides with the table that you're jolted back to awareness, as that gap between prediction and reality is now formed and unavoidable. Case studies make these observations of psychology actually tangible. The aforementioned case of Henry Molaison demonstrated that the hippocampus's role in forming new memories is integral. Phineas Gage's accident with the eye rod going through his brain showed that your prefrontal cortex underpins personality. Modern fMRI research has revealed that recalling autobiographical memories and imagining the future activates overlapping brain networks, showing that there's a link between your sense of self directly to memory and imagination. And I think that's fascinating. One approach to identity is the Big Five model of personality. This was developed by Paul Costa and Robert McCrae. It describes 5 broad traits. Openness to experience, which reflects curiosity, imagination, and willingness to explore novelty. Conscientiousness, which describes your organization, reliability, and discipline. Extroversion is your social ability and whether or not you regain energy from interaction or solitude, which would be introversion. Agreeableness, which captures your compassion, trust, and cooperation with your fellow person. And neuroticism, which describes sensitivity to negative emotions. People that scored high with neuroticism tend to be more prone to anxiety. People that tend to score low with neuroticism might be more emotionally stable. And these traits will affect how you experience events as well. 2 people can experience the same stressor, but one that's higher in neuroticism might interpret everything as being too overwhelming for them to handle, whereas someone that's scored higher in conscientiousness, let's say, they might frame this challenge as something to overcome. Your brain constantly reinforces itself through the continuity of identity. This is done through the default mode network, which is a set of interconnected regions that activate whenever you think about yourself, recall the past, or imagine the future. So this network allows you to mentally travel in time, stitching together your past, your present, and your future to create cohesive, coherent memories and plans within your mind. Memories. A sense of self. So from all these neurons firing in this electrical storm, releasing chemicals, these neurotransmitter, these waves of thoughts, processes, experiences, emotions, shows that this psychological approach to who you are shows that your identity, it's not a static essence. You're not stuck as one being. It is a dynamic process of your brain constantly rewriting and writing new information as you develop and take in new stimuli, information, events, experiences, memories. All this shows that the psychological approach to who are you is not fixed, but it's constantly unfolding. You're shaped by experiences. You're shaped by the stories that you tell and how you live it. And that is who you are from a psychological perspective. Thank you very much for watching. There will be new videos each Friday as we explore different facets and perspectives in who are you? Trying to answer this timeless question of what does it mean to be alive? What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be thinking? And today was our psychological approach. I hope you've learned something, and if you have, please feel free to click that subscribe button and also tap that notification bell so you get notified of when I release new content and uploads. Thank you again very much for watching. I hope you have a wonderful day. Until next time.